welcome to Meet the Author, a Founding Fuel series where we explore ideas that move people and sometimes entire systems. And I'm Charles Assisi, co-founder at Founding Fuel. And my guest today is Subroto Bagchi. He's someone whom I've known for many years, has built companies, served in government, and his most recent book, The Day the Chariot Moved, asks a deceptively simple a question. What does it take to move India's chariot? And here he tells stories of ordinary people who makes extraordinary change possible. From engineers and teachers to a young woman who drives a freight train. And this is my copy of the book. And if I may open it, you will see that there are notes and there are annotations. And, I've argued with him in this book. And because it's that kind of book which is a meditation on motion, leadership, and care. You spent some years inside government with a place where most corporate leaders assume is dysfunctional. And yet you begin your book by saying that government works, but not just the way we imagine it. Can you unpack that for us? What does it
Yeah,
take?
I can do that easily at many levels.
Right.
One disclaimer though,
Mhm.
this is not the first time that I am smelling and tasting government because I worked with the government for 8 years. I was born in a government family. I was born in a government quarter. My father was a small-time government servant. And then in our family, the rule was that, if you were to look for a job, you had to work for the government. Okay. I was obviously a black sheep. But the breakfast and the dinner table conversation was all about government. Okay. After my father retired, my brother became a bureaucrat. We produced two brothers who joined the army and the Air Force. So in a sense, government actually pretty much was part of my growing up until I was about 19 and I veered away and went first to the private sector and then to the information technology industry. So with that disclaimer, okay, that I have a government, upbringing in a sense, and I had this intense experience for 8 years. I must tell you, I'll just pick one example of how government works, and we don't realize it. Think of COVID.
Yep.
More than 2 years, everything was locked down. Okay. Now, but we had food on the plate.
Yes.
How did that happen? It happened because there's a government who was then running the supply chain, made sure that the freight trains moved. Okay. That there were trucks on the road and those trucks were safe to ply. And then, apart from the food on the plate, veering an entire nation through a process of uncertainty and huge upheavals. So COVID was a time when India had a civilizational displacement. We don't call it a refugee problem, but Indians became refugee in their own land. So it is true that many of them had to walk back and they were on tractor trailers, they were on bicycles and all that stuff. But who was the first responder to run the Shramik Express? It was the government. Then came the jab, right? Who organized that jab and who made sure that it was available? It was the government. Of course, I should not have forgotten that in between, who ran the hospitals on an emergency mode? One of the things that happened, if you recall, is in the first and the second wave particularly, the need for intubation just spiraled, where you put ventilator in somebody's throat. In a state like Odisha and other states as well, Maharashtra may be slightly better. In a state like Odisha of 45 million people, 4.5 crores. There are like a dozen nurses who actually were trained to intubate. And overnight, you have to create capacity and you have to train, hundreds of nurses who can intubate. And intubation can mean you can kill somebody if you don't know how to intubate. In that one instance, instead of trying to save a life, you can kill somebody. So if you look at the totality of how COVID was managed, okay, not as a blip, but over a long period of time, more than 2 years, and the aftermath. It was not the private sector who was actually was in command. It was the government that was in command. Oh, I should have also talked about law and order. While the country was locked down, the police system worked. Safety was, not an issue. So if you look at the totality of that, we don't associate this with the government.
Mhm.
Okay. And I can, as I said, I can give you 20 such use cases where the government is working, that is how the nation is working. The nation is making progress. But, it is not just the corporate people, it is the educated class, the middle class, the upper middle class, and certainly the rich who become very selective in terms of their interpretation of the government and their ideas about how government works internally. So I hope when people read the book, The Day the Chariot Moves, we'll see vignettes of the government and people who stand for the government, which are the politicians and the bureaucrats, largely, and get a different perspective as well.
Right. A follow-up question out here very quickly. You've written about civil servants who surprise you with competence and passion. What happens to that single file that can vanish for weeks? And what keeps good people going in the system for years in that labyrinth?
It's a very powerful question, and thank you for asking that. But that question has to be interpreted in a larger context. And let me give you the context first. So when I was growing up, I was born in 1957. So I'm talking about my pre-teens mostly. And as I was telling you, I'm a child of a government servant. There was a thought process that, if there's corruption in the country, okay, you didn't use the word corruption, but files vanishing have to do with corruption, okay, and vested interests. So the thought process post-independent India was that if there's corruption in the system, there are a set of politicians, not all politicians, who are corrupt. Okay. Then came my time when I had crossed over from pre-teens into a young adult who had gone into the workplace, and I'm talking about post-emergency India. And then corruption become more easily accepted as a tag that you used with 3/4 of politicians, okay, but not with bureaucrats. Then came a time when I was past my 40s, and you talked about the corruption and the bureaucracy, but you didn't paint the bureaucracy with corruption. You said that it's an exception. 10%, 15%, 20%, maybe 30% bureaucrats are corrupt. Now time has come where the moment you say bureaucracy, we say, oh, bureaucrats are corrupt. In this entire narrative, so first it was politician, bureaucrats were an exception. Then came bureaucrats, where the honest and efficient bureaucrat has that population has shrunk. But in this entire thing, we absolve ourselves and do not discuss about society. Today, if you look at India, society has become largely corrupt. I know I'm making a very volatile statement here. But even today, post-demonetization, post all the cleaning up that happened or effort to clean up that happened. Every day I go and buy a 40,000, 50,000 rupees of service by a contractor who has to supply me something. I want to go register a house. I want to do anything. The first response by the contractor is, or the shopkeeper for that matter is, आपको बिल चाहिए, बिल लेंगे तो GST लग जाएगा. And that guy has that confidence to ask that question as if he is doing a service to you, because a lot of people in society are saying, नहीं नहीं नहीं, bill की जरूरत नहीं है. Okay. So if you look at whether it is avoiding taxes to the government, if you look at how easily we want to push through a land deal or a real estate deal, or how easily we want to actually curry favor because we are in a hurry, okay, and we have the money. And then you realize that society has come to that situation where, it's very easy to say that it is being demanded of me and I'm giving. But no, I would very bravely put forth the idea that many times a society that is coming forward and say, yeah, this is fine, so the society is in a sense seducing the society. It's a mutual seduction game that is going on, which is dangerous. Okay. So the file vanishing, is as much the politician's responsibility as the bureaucrat's responsibility as the responsibility of the citizen. I think all three have actually have abandoned their sense of patriotism in some sense. And that's difficult. That is the problematic situation where India is. We are very patriotic. Citizens are very patriotic when it comes to expressing love and affection for the country when the country is playing cricket or when there's a skirmish on the border. I don't see myself, managing the system as lack of patriotism. And I'm very quick to say that, I'm being forced into it, as against saying that I'm seduced and I'm willing to get into the seduction. And look, sometimes I seduce as well.
Right. I hear you. I hear you. Yeah. So let me shift.
Back to your question. If you look at countries where all you have to do is to look at the Transparency International list.
Yeah.
And if you look at the most transparent countries, it is not the law. It's not the politician. It's not the bureaucrat. The transparency is a citizen priority. It's a citizen demand. It's a citizen behavior. And I always say that per capita, India has the highest amount of laws. But law is not a substitute for character. And character is not nested in a bureaucracy. The bureaucracy is created by the system, by society. The same kid, okay, who has seen parents to be, oiling the system, comes and joins the bureaucrat. And then don't give moral lecture to that kid. Don't say, because you serve the tricolor, you now have to behave like a saint. Okay. So we are all in a deadly embrace of sorts, and we need to untangle this. And maybe at a civilizational level, it will happen. It is probably going to go to the other extreme before people raise their voices. People say this is not right. But inherently, to sum up this conversation, societies have a big role, and countries that are high on the Transparency International list are countries where the transparency, honesty, probity in public life and private life begins at home, begins with the citizen himself or herself.
I hear you. I want to shift gear bit to a very interesting and a very wonderful story in the book about this young woman whom you describe, who goes on to become a loco-pilot running freight trains through the night. And it's one of those images that, that stays with me of steel, speed, solitude. Um, how did you get to meet her? And what did that moment teach you about the aspirations of gender and New India? You've described a little bit, but can you tell us some more about?
So it's very interesting, when I joined the government, since I was coming in from outside, I had negotiated with Mr. Naveen Patnaik that he will not mostly see me, and certainly he will not see me in the first 30 days. And the idea was that I would travel to the 30 districts of Odisha in the first 30 days by road and see what the reality is on the ground. Then I pull back and say what needs to be fixed, what needs to be accelerated. And, in that process, when I visited the districts, I visited many skill institutions, ITIs and polytechnics in particular. Wherever I went, people, when they presented themselves, talked about how many machines they have, how much land they have, how much building they have, and quickly would start whining about how many peons have retired and clerks have retired. And that is the reason why the system is not working. And we urgently need peons and clerks. So this discussion actually it made me angry at some level, and then I said, no. When I come to review, I will only review four things, and I reduced it to a formula. I called it the 10-6-4-2 formula. So when I walk into an educational institution, you have to tell me the names of 10 students you're proud of. Of those 10, you have to tell me names of 6 who have made a name for themselves outside the state. Of the 10, you have to tell me names of 4 who are girls. And of the 10, you have to tell me names of 2 who have learned something from you and today have become micro-entrepreneurs. They're not in the job queue. And all hell broke loose because people had a hard time. Okay. But soon this became folklore. And the moment I would walk in, they would tell me 10-6-4-2. So in the early days when they were struggling, I went to an ITI in a very, interior place called Bargarh on the western part of Odisha. And I asked the principal, tell me about 4. And the principal, he'd and hawed and said that, sir, I'm new and I'm about to retire. So I said, that doesn't matter to me. You need to know your students. And if you don't know your role models, then you can't run this institution. Then an old man, an old instructor said, sir, there was a girl when talking about the 4. So I said, tell me more about her. So he said that, he came from a poor tribal family and he came here and today she works for the Indian Railways. So I said, tell me, what does she do? And the man said, sir, she's a loco-pilot. So I said, I need to talk to her right away. And in the book, I told how in a country of 1.4 billion people, if you want to track any individual under 10 minutes, it's only government who does it and can do it. Okay. So under 10 minutes, she was tracked and I was talking to her. And so she didn't know obviously who I was. And it was a call from her alma mater. So she was willing to talk to a stranger. So she said, मैं मुनि टिगा हूँ, मैं आजकल भुवनेश्वर में पोस्टेड हूँ, खुर्दा से पलासा तक हर रोज इंटरसिटी एक्सप्रेस को खींच के लेके जाती हूँ और वापस लेके आती हूँ. I was sweating, I was jumping up from my chair and said, my God, this is my star. Okay. I can, with the system, instead of worrying about what to fix in the system, working with the system, if I can help to produce, change the scale and help to produce people like Munitiga, then a couple of things happen. One is that you create not just skill development, but you create intergenerational human transformation. You take Munitiga. She says, मैं खींच के लेके जाती हूँ. Okay. She खींches a WAP 7 locomotive engines. And on a typical day, 1,200 passengers sleep in that train. They don't know a young, fragile girl is actually kitching the WAP-7 locomotive engine. After this girl, Adivasi girl, orphaned early in her life, nobody can mess with her. Her children and their children will take a different trajectory.
Yes.
Her mother-in-law cannot bully her, and a drunken husband cannot actually take control of her life. Lesser chance that a drunken husband can do that. So what I argued during my work and in the book is that we need to take a wider view of things like skill development and said this is not just about creating employability. It is about human transformation. The government has the power for human transformation because the government works with scale. And the beautiful thing is, like, the twilight sets in and you look at the sky, you squint your eye, and you can't look at a star and then suddenly you find a twinkle and then say, oh, that's my first star. And then lo and behold, another appears and another appears and another appears. So my book is full of stars like Munitiga. And of course, boys as well. And that makes it aspirational, and that makes you feel that there is good work to be done out there. And it's beautiful.
So this is a powerful metaphor for motion and courage quietly at work, if I may summarize it that way. But having said that, there's something else that you've spoken of that hit me in the gut actually, and it's an arresting idea. Is the distinction you made between poverty and what you call just above poverty, and where you spoke about people who rise above the poverty line are often the most anxious because that one shock, such as a medical bill, can push them back into poverty
Yeah.
or below the poverty line. And that
Yeah.
really hit me in the gut. Now, how did you come to see that layer of India? And does policy even recognize this zone, or are we still measuring success by crude poverty ratios?
So, I was quite, drawn in by the work of Mr. Bankar Roy, who was a bureaucrat in Rajasthan. I'm sure people know about his pioneering work in relation to poverty alleviation. And then I had the opportunity to meet another IS officer who quit the services and became an academic. His name is Anirudh Krishna. And Anirudh Krishna actually wrote a book called One Illness Away. So people like Roy and people like Anirudh Krishna, they tell you that poverty alleviation is something that we have subcontracted, we have outsourced to government. Okay, you and I do not see our connection to poverty alleviation. So that's another conversation. But now that we have done it and government does it, with sometimes with great success, sometimes with moderate success, and sometimes, it loses its way. And people move from the bottom of poverty. And there is a desire to move. Nobody wants to be poor. And they make a valiant effort. They make physical, mental, emotional, they pay emotional price to move from their state of poverty. And just as they are crossing that line, okay, just when, the young person from a village has acquired a two-wheeler, okay, meets with an accident and is now going to be in a hospital for 3 months. Okay. So we take it for granted that nothing significant will happen. Food will still be cooked at home for me if I was to be in a hospital for 3 months. But hospitalization, sickness, illness, can be so debilitating at multiple different levels. It could mean that you first of all default on the EMI payment on the bike. Second, you get sucked into the mumbo jumbo that the orthopedic surgeon actually deals with you and says that you could be trying this, but you could be also trying that, which will cost you 40,000 rupees more. So you scamper and go and find somebody who will loan you, or go to your family goes to a pawnbroker or whatever. But third and most importantly, you're no longer earning a wage. So where does food come from? So the entire net savings of that micro entity is now exhausted. And that not just that one individual, but the micro entity that had made its way, had shattered through the sound barrier of poverty, has now sunken back into poverty. And people who will sink back into poverty will have more difficulty, again, breaking the sound barrier of poverty. So this is one issue. So it is not that we can just outsource poverty alleviation. It is not that we can become self-congratulatory just because so many people have crossed below the BPL category. But as a society, as a nation, as policymakers, we have to keep an hawk's eye, okay, to protect people through policy, through structures, through conversations, through narratives, to protect those people. We need to give a longer safe passage, if you will. Okay. Look at the economic impact of COVID. You and I were least affected economically. We sprang back. But how many people sprang back? Because they live in silence. They don't object to their state, that we don't get to realize. The other aspect is minimalism. When we look at development, okay, because development is actually pushed by the upper middle class and the haves, but not the have-nots. So each time the needle moves a little bit, we become very self-congratulatory. We said, oh, look at this, this guy was poor, okay, now he's able to do this. In reality, what has happened is you have moved people from what I call poverty to respectable poverty. ओ इसका तो 10,000 रुपए तनख्वाह थी, अब देखिए इसका 15,000 हो गया. Is 15,000 enough? What does 15,000 rupees buy to a young man or a young woman in a place like Mumbai or Nagpur or Bhubaneswar or NCR or Coimbatore? We don't apply our mind the way Singapore does. We don't apply our mind to say housing is important, savings is important. Okay. If you give an ITI kid who's just come out of 2 years of education a starting salary of 10,000, 12,000, 15,000 rupees, can that guy actually save enough money to break out of poverty? But more than breaking out of poverty, when you are 18, 19, it is not about breaking out of poverty. You want to live well, you want to eat well, you want to marry somebody, and you want to start a home. So the entire that desire is not going to change because you are an IS officer and I am a daily wage worker. At 22, 20, 25, dreams are personal and dreams are universal. And dreams cannot be, disenfranchised. So how do we enable that? That changes the poverty conversation. Am I making sense?
Yes. I hear where you're coming
We
from.
cannot be minimalist when we are dealing with this huge population that needs to move on. So we are maximalist when it comes to you and me. But when it comes to them, we are minimalist. Okay. So how many people would say that, oh, so this is Diwali and I got this pizza, I paid 600 rupees for the pizza, and let me give 1,000 rupees to this guy and tell the guy, go buy yourself a pizza. We are very happy to give 40 rupees of tip because it's Diwali. How much is enough? How much is enough for me? What pleasantly surprises me and what pleasantly surprises this guy? The combined market cap of the top two delivery companies in the country is $38 billion. Last I had tracked. How is it translating down to the guy who wears that dirty t-shirt, moves in a broken, two-wheeler vehicle, weaves his way through carbon monoxide, a sea, an ocean of carbon monoxide to make that pizza happen on your hand? How is that $38 billion translating to the well-being of this person is a function of minimalism versus maximalism. We are maximalist when it comes to the market cap. We are minimalist when it comes to this guy because we say, you know what? ये अगर देहात में होता तो इसका क्या होता? अरे अब तो बैंक अकाउंट खुल गया, अब तो आधार कार्ड बन गया. सो वहां पे खाने को नहीं मिलता था. आप देखिए यहाँ पे तो उसका बैंक में अभी 1 साल काम किया, 1 लाख रुपए का पैसा है, until he topples from the two-wheeler.
It's a very powerful way to put it. That just hit me in the gut once again.
Yeah. But we need not be overwhelmed with this. We need to engage with this. And more educated I am, more fortunate I am to have been born in a different womb. I need to have grace, and I need to say, if this country has to be civilizationally significant, where everybody needs to have a basic access to health, education, hygiene, well-being, we need to say, I'm part of this. I'm going to make this happen. I'll engage. Patriotism cannot be a simulated experience, and patriotism is not about, being digital. So you watch the television, you watch your favorite border film from the security of your home, and on Independence Day and Republic Day, you forward tricolor emojis to your friends. No, that's not what it is. It's you may say I'm being idealistic. Please grant me idealism. Without idealism, where would we be? You and I are having this conversation because parents were idealistic. They say, yeah, you can. They didn't have enough when they said, I'll give you a good education. Be an honest, good citizen. You find a good job, do better than I did. So you and I are children of idealism. So we need to have a radioactive transmission of idealism in this country, like never before. It's a civilizational prerogative and it's a civilizational opportunity.
Sure. If I may ask you to, before we close, if I may ask you to reflect for a moment on how have you changed? How has your leadership style changed as you shifted from being an entrepreneur and to spending time in the government? What changes have happened? How have you fundamentally changed as a person?
I think it has made me a beautiful human being. I was telling somebody who came to meet me on the 40th day of working with the government, and he was a well-wisher, and he said, I just came by to see if they're treating you well and you're still intact. And so I smiled, and I said to him, without realizing what I was saying, I said to him, you know what? These 40 days are so precious to me that I won't trade these 40 days for the 40 years that I was there in the private sector. So those are beautiful. If I were to drop down dead today, at the deathbed, if you see me actually vanishing with a smile on my lips, It is not the IT industry. It is not the experience of being an entrepreneur, a writer, author. I would say these 8 years have been so magical. I'll say Munitiga's face in front of me, and I will hug that imagery. Now, how has it changed me? It has changed my perspective. And it has changed my working style because I realized when I moved from the IT industry into the government, I realized first thing that hit me was scale. When you move from CEO of one company to become CEO of another company, okay, you may be looking at 1x, 2x scale, maybe 3x scale, okay. But when you enter the government, then you see that the smallest government department has to deal with millions of people. We talk about population of India, we don't realize how it devolves down. And then when you are looking at the millions of people and you have a stodgy system, you have few idealistic people, few people who are average, and many people who are coasting, and some people who are actually eating away the system. They're doing the subversive compliance, they're the cancer. And you move in there, and then you can't do cherry picking. You have to say, this is my system, these are my people, and I have to work with these people. That ability, okay, gets taken away from you when you work in a structured environment. When you look at large systems, you can't navigate large systems with rationality. You have to love. It may sound very strange. So when you walk into a large system, unstructured system, nebulous system, constantly moving system, you have to begin by saying, I accept you. I'm not going to cherry pick. I'm not going to point a critical finger at you. I want to be part of you. When you do that, the system has a soul, and that soul actually listens and it responds differently. You'll find two politicians, one guy, who cannot move anything, becomes a chief minister, becomes a prime minister. And then another guy comes, same system, and things begin to move. The difference between the two is seldom intellect. The difference between the two is seldom raw competence. The difference is one person is connecting with the soul of the system, which people like Peter Senge, one of the pioneers of systems theory, people like Otto Scrammer, and I write about Otto Scrammer's work in this book and his guidance to people who are wanting to engage with transformational change in this book, they realize and they talk about it. So how have I changed? I think I've understood the power of engaging with a system when you want to actually impact intergenerational change. The rules are very different. And I think the whole 8 years of experience, which I captured in this book, The Day the Chariot Moved, tells you about that story in every page. And it is very fungible. Today, if I were to come back to the private sector, I have to build a company, I would look at issues, problems, opportunities with a very different perspective. I think it has left a lot of humanism in me. And, the fact is that you can make bigger change happen. You can make change stick when you accept a system in its totality. Every day in the private sector, now I realize how much I've seen it in my life, how people make lateral shifts in their career. I was this business unit head at TCS, and now I become, big honcho in Infosys. And before you know, there's an organ transplant failure. Because you bring your biases, you bring your past, you bring your baggage, and you telescope all that to the new environment. But imagine for a moment you're a politician, you've just got elected, okay, and you are a minister now. You can, to an extent, choose your private secretary and maybe three other people, okay, who are your immediate uh, your points of reliance, but you have to deal with the bureaucracy which has been existing for decades before you. You work with them, through them. So similarly, you are a collector, young man, young woman, just come out with green horns from the UPSC, 2 or 3 or 4 years of experience, and you go to a district. You are from Rajasthan, you get posted in Tamil Nadu. And as a collector, which is or a superintendent of police, which are critical pillars of the development narrative, of critical pillars of the republic. That young person cannot say, I don't like this corporator, cannot say, I don't like this head clerk, cannot say, I don't like these people. Those who succeed in public life are people who say, you are mine. I'm part of you. You're not part of me. The acceptance of the totality as is the beginning of all progress.
Mr. Bagchi, thank you for reminding us that leadership begins with service and that motion is possible if someone cares enough to embrace.
Yes, Charles. Thank you for the opportunity to have a conversation with you. It's been ages. And so good luck with your great work. And I hope paths meet again.
Yes. To our listeners, I hope this conversation leaves you thinking about the quiet movers in our own world. Until next time, I'm Charles Assisi for Founding Fuel, and this is Meet the Author.